So I'm here at the Ridge in Birmingham, Alabama. Today is August 30th, 2022, with Dr. Harry Reeder, the pastor, senior pastor of Briarwood Presbyterian Church. And we're talking to him about his experience over the years in ministry and how when he came to faith and how he came to faith, and kind of some life lessons learned and some things he could pass on to the next generation. So, Dr. Harry, you have it. God bless.
Well, James, glad to do this. I've enjoyed our relationship. And now, my goodness, I guess it's been about 30 years. Off and on, we've been cross-pollinating in life and ministry. So grateful for that relationship. In terms of answering your questions, first of all, I probably need to make clear that I was raised in a Christian home. I was born, my dad and mom actually carrying me as a 2-month-old baby made a commitment to Christ in their home church when one of their sons of that church had his first evangelistic crusade. And that young man was named Billy Graham. We were the Reeders and the Grahams were in the what was called Calvary Independent Presbyterian Church. And then my dad was in minor league baseball, so we moved all around. I went to 11 schools in 12 years, but was raised in a Christian home. When we came back to Charlotte in my junior and high school years, we went to the Christian Missionary Alliance Church, and I did not come to Christ. I went the other way. I had a secret life that when I went away to college to play ball and quote unquote go to school, the secret life became a pretty public life, and I went pretty deep into an immoral, profane, rather violent and vulgar lifestyle, but it was always empty, and I knew it was empty, and the gospel kept calling me, so I flunked out of East Carolina and lost no more ball, no more school, and just decided, pretty empty. I didn't really care if I lived or died, pretty much. So I volunteered for the Marine Corps, recon, and then in the meantime, I ended up, I met this young lady who worked for my mother that summer and took her out, and that's my mother. You keep trying to fix me up. Why didn't you try to fix me up with her? And she said, well, she's a little out of your league, son. And but I'm competitive. So she was a Christian, so I said, oh yeah, let's go to church. So I went to church, and I picked a little Presbyterian church because I didn't think anybody was there. I mean, they didn't believe much. I figured they're Presbyterian. I didn't know there was different kinds, and this one believed everything. And a guy that played ball with my dad was there, and God used him, and through a series of events, I came to Christ. Then, because you're an athlete, you got some reputation, you're eager, you're a new Christian, small Presbyterian church. That means you're the youth. That means you're the youth pastor, and I think Malachi is an Italian prophet named Malachi, and I'm now the youth director. But God started leading all these kids to Himself, and everybody kept telling me, "We think you're called to the ministry," and I said no. And the Grahams thought I was called to the ministry, the McClinics and the Readers and everybody, but I know. And so I went back to East Carolina, changed my major to criminology, filled out the papers for the Board of Narcotics and Dangerous Drugs, had 1 year of eligibility left, switched to golf, and then and I was a youth pastor up there, and the Lord just called me. So I'm standing in the middle of a tobacco field, and at 1 o'clock in the morning, just arguing with the Lord, and finally surrendered. Went in, woke up my wife, said, "Hey, I think I'm called to the ministry." She said, "Okay." I said, "Yeah, but you didn't buy into this." She said, "No." She said, "But when I was 13, I went forward to be a missionary or a pastor's wife. So I've just been kind of waiting on you to catch up." And So then I went to Covenant College and found out that my head could be used for more than baseball cap and a golf visor, and came under the influence. Actually, I was a security guard there, a part-time job, and actually was the bodyguard for Francis Schaeffer when he came to do the conferences, and was mentored by Dr. Henry Cravendam and also Will Barker, and it was just a phenomenal education. And God continued to direct me toward ministry. Graduated, went part-time to an independent seminary for a couple of years while I helped a little Bible church get started in Chattanooga. And then I finished with Westminster Seminary. That was the fourth best decision of my life. Jesus, Cindy, Covenant, and Westminster were four great decisions. I came into the PCA, a little church they were going to close in Miami. It was a church revitalization project. I said, could you give us 6 months? And God gave us a multiracial, multi-ethnic church there in Miami, Florida. Pineland, still there today, pastored by a marvelous young Hispanic guy now. And it's still that kind of a multicultural church, and I prefer to say multi-ethnic church. And and then it grew pretty rapidly. And then I was asked, would you consider being the guinea pig of a new project they call Flagship Church Planting? And that was to send somebody to plant a church in a city where we don't have a PCA church, with the idea of planting a presbytery. So they sent me to, they asked me to go to New York. I said, no, I don't think so. And although it was hard for me to leave Miami and the church, but they asked me to go to New York, and I said no. And so praise the Lord, they got Tim Keller instead of me. And so that was a blessing of the Lord's providence. But I went to Charlotte. We planted Christ Covenant, 2 presbyteries, 3,000 people in the church, and 2 presbyteries over 17 years. And then God called me to Briarwood. And so there are 3 experiences I have had, and those experiences are church revitalization, Pinelands, church planting, Christ Covenant, and then what I call church acceleration, and that is to come to a good church and then try to take it to the next level, and that would be Briarwood. And so we have a ministry called Lampstand Conference, and that's what we have 3 tracks. First of all, what is a lampstand, a gospel-healthy church? Then how do you plant one, ignite the flame? How do you revitalize one, fanning the flame? And how do you do church acceleration, and that is nurturing the flame? And so we've got a good faculty. It's a great conference. We do it in January of every year. Now let me go to your second question, which was, Harry, what did you think did you think Briarwood? Did you think conference, teaching at seminaries, Ligonier, all of that? No. I can tell you exactly what I thought. I thought the Lord had called me to ministry, and I remember sitting outside of Faith Presbyterian Church that had about 150 people in it, and saying to my wife, well, honey, if the Lord allows me to be ordained and be in the ministry, maybe one day we could pastor a church even like this. That was my whole desire, my whole life. My wife will tell you, everybody that's close to me, I have only wanted to pastor a small, we'll come back to that.
Okay, let's tune out here for lunch, and you guys hang on for part 2. Here we are back with Dr. Harry Reeder for part 2. You guys who held on, that's great stuff. So, Dr. Reeder, you were talking about how things had happened, and you had got called to the ministry, and all the wonderful things that have happened in the 3 levels of ministry. And then the next part of that is just kind of what kind of legacy would you like to see happen with the next generation?
Yeah, you had also asked me when I went into ministry, what did I expect? What was my objective? And so the answer to those two questions, what legacy do I want to leave, and what did I expect when I went into ministry, are inseparably connected. When I went into ministry, due to my upbringing and my family, and my grandparents, my parents, one of the things that was greatly prized was consistency, work ethic, and but most of all was faithfulness. When I became a believer, that just went to the top. I've always been attracted to something I know the listeners all have heard, and that's the epitaph that you want on your gravestone: "Well done, good and faithful servant." Well done. I don't want to be mediocre. I'll never be the best, but I want to do my best. And so well done. And what I do, I want it to be good, and I want it to be faithful. And so that's been my. In fact, my wife and I, after I surrendered to the call to the ministry, we went back to the little Presbyterian church in Charlotte that summer. And I sit there with her. It's a little church of about 150 people. And I said to her, the fact is, I said, honey, she said, well, what do you want to do? And I said, honey, maybe God would allow us to pastor a church like this. My whole life, anybody that knows me will tell you this. My wife will tell you immediately. My whole life, all I have wanted to do is pastor a First Presbyterian church in a small southern town. That's all I've wanted to do. Just call me to First Presbyterian, Waynesboro, Georgia. That's fine with me. And but God has not seen fit to send me into those kind of situations. So I've had church revitalization at Pinelands, church planting, and the Lord blessed it at Christ Covenant, and then church, the next level pastor by coming to Briarwood. And but that's all I've ever wanted to be, is faithful. If I can be faithful in little, then maybe I can be faithful in the much that He would entrust to me. Then you say, what legacy do I want to leave? Oh, and let me say one more thing, James. In our discussion, you mentioned, you asked me a question that might heighten this. When I'm doing ministry, I'm a very simple person. I love the intricacies of theology. I love the majesty of God's wisdom and ecclesiology. I love the Word. I love to preach it and teach it. And that's just an extraordinary blessing for me, all of those things. But my life ministry is pretty much guided by a couple of channel markers. And one of them is to be faithful. Here's what I know. I want to, as a Christian and as a minister, I want to show up, I want to stand up, and I want to speak up. When is the right time? That's what I want to do. I want my children to know I'll be home at night. I want my children to know I'll be there the next morning when they get up. I want my wife to know I'll be home and I'll speak and I will be there in the morning. And I want, that's one of the things I want to do. I want my congregation to know that when they encounter crisis, when they encounter, is that I or those that are in leadership, we will be there for you. We'll be there proactively, we'll be there reactively. And on the pulpit, and then from the pulpit will come a faithful, it will not be the best sermon ever preached, but it will be a faithful exposition of God's Word. The small group discipleship will be to train you to know Christ and make Christ known. We want to be faithful. Here's the way I like to say it. The church has a narrow mission, and it produces Christians who have a broad mission. Christians are salt of the earth and light of the world, but how do you get them there? by the church doing what it's called to do, led by leaders who lead the church to do what Christ told it to do. Make disciples. Make disciples who go in evangelism, who baptize and enfold, who teach and equip, and who worship the Lord. That's what we do. That's the purpose that we're here for. And I want to be faithful to that mission. I want to be on mission, on message, and in ministry. And I'm somewhere between 0 and 100% effective, but that's what I want to be. The second thing, that channel marker that has helped me is always do the next right thing. Do the next right thing for the right reason, in the right way, and in the right tone. I want to do the next right thing. Do the next right thing in a way that honors the Lord. I want to do it the right way and for the right reason. I want to do it for His glory and other people's benefit. I don't want to do it for myself. I want to die to myself and live unto Christ. Again, do the next right thing for the right reason in the right way. I am somewhere between 0 and 100% effective on that too. But those are the channel markers for me in a faithful ministry. I want to be on mission, on message, in ministry, show up, stand up, and speak up. And then I want to, these aphorisms kind of help me. They may not help other people, but they help me. And then I also want to, by God's grace, I want to do the next right thing for the right reason and in the right way. And so when I'm done and God's given me my last orders, then I'm ready to go home. People ask me about retirement. RC and I used to talk about this. And I remember sitting in his study one time and we were talking, and I said, well, what's your plan? And he said, well, my plan is pretty simple. They're going to have to peel my hands off the pulpit and stick me in the grave. And there's RC preaching with oxygen going up his nose at the end of his life, with being faithful, having to ride up to the pulpit because he can't walk to it anymore. And that's the way, that's the way I look at it pretty much. I'm not interested in ending my life picking up conch shells on the Gulf Coast. I love Paul's picture. I fought the good fight. I finished the course. And then he says this, I've been poured out as a drink offering. In other words, he doesn't say burnt offering. With a burnt offering, you got ashes left. But with a drink offering, you've got nothing left. And you're just poured out. And that's the way I want to finish. You know, Paul describes not only the Christian life, but the ministry like a marathon. My kids, that's how my daughters paid for their education. I'm going to sound like a daddy now. They were really, really good runners. One of them almost made it to the nationals, and then, which is from where you get the Olympics. But and I love to watch them run. And they were both distance runners. And here's some, as a distance runner, you want every mile to be faster than the previous. They call it negative splits. Each mile, you start, the next mile is faster. And your best mile is your last mile. And that's the way I want to be. That's the way I want to end. And that's faithful. And that means you want to start right. And that means you want to make each mile a little faster, a little better, and you keep growing. And then your last mile is your best mile. It may not be your most energetic mile, but it's your best mile. And so I kind of want to leave that legacy for guys of Christian manhood in the ministry, in which a man can increasingly be identified as a man of God. You know, one time I've got a son who bears my name, and he was playing on the golf team, and my daughters had just finished practice, so I was waiting to pick up my kids, and all these kids, this horde of kids, were coming across the field, And the guy said, "You recognize your children?" I said, "Oh yeah, I can recognize them." And he said, "How?" I said, "Oh, I can recognize them by the way they walk." And that's the way I want to be in ministry. I want Jesus to recognize me by the way I walk. I'm His, and I want other people to recognize by my walk and my talk that I'm His. Again, I'm not perfect. Again, I don't do this for salvation. I do this for ministry and the privilege of ministry.
Dr. Reeder, it's been a privilege. Thank you so much. And you guys, there's a storm out, so that's the lights going on and off. And stay tuned for more. God bless.